So, Brad, when we were last FaceTiming yesterday, I had on a little woolen cap. And you're like, oh, my goodness, look at who's chilly over there. Because it had dropped down to 61 degrees in Southern California.
Yeah.
And it actually got me thinking, this is a question I legitimately want to ask you. So I live in Los Angeles, California, kind of famous for its warm winters. You live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, not exactly famous for its warm winters. But I do not know you in a snow environment. Whenever I have ever seen you, it's usually at conventions.
Yeah.
And that's, traditionally in spring, summer, and maybe in fall.
Yeah.
So I've always seen kind of shorts Brad Geiger, maybe light t-shirt Brad Geiger. But what is deep of winter Brad Geiger like? What is that Brad Geiger?
Cold.
That's ComicLab, everybody. We'll see you next week.
I hate cold weather. I actually, there's nothing I want more to do during the winter than to avoid cold weather. Like I don't want to go tobogganing. I don't want to go out and build a snowman. I don't want to do any of those things. I want to huddle in the corner and wait for the warm weather to come back. I literally want to hibernate. I don't want anything to do with cold weather. I despise it. And there's so many times my wife, bless her heart, has tried to, plan like little outings and stuff in the winter. And I'm just like we went to Colonial Williamsburg one time, I think right around New Year's, right around this time of year. And it was delightful. It was fine, but standing outside in the cold makes me miserable. And I tried so hard, we're gonna go out and watch this guy hit an anvil now. That's wonderful. Let's go see the blacksmith. He'll have a fire. We'll go there.
Fire.
But I can't stand cold weather. I despise it with a passion.
So, legitimate question.
Yeah.
Why did you choose Philadelphia?
Because I was originally in Michigan. Michigan winters were brutal. And I mean,
really,
because
you get that lake effect. It's ridiculous, right?
And in the thumb of Michigan, we were on a peninsula. So
you were surrounded by water, right?
Within 15 minutes,
That's the definition of a peninsula, everybody. Good job, Dave. Dave figured it out.
Yeah, north and east and west, within 15 minutes, we were to a Great Lake. So we got a lot of lake effect, and it was brutal winters. And like we lived in a ranch house, and I remember many winters when the snow got up past the windows, right up to the eaves, and the roof. We could walk right up onto the roof at one point.
Can I tell you, as a Californian, that almost sounds like a fairy tale to me, like in terms of like the unrealness of it. I can't imagine having that much snow.
Oh, and we all shoveled snow. We all the time we were out there shoveling snow. My dad's got a snowblower now. Now he's the old man in the neighborhood that goes around since he's retired and makes sure that he blows out everybody's driveways. He's going around with
his machine, going
loves doing.
I got to tell you, though, Brad, honestly, if I was 65 to 75 and I owned a snowblower, I feel like that I'd be living my best life. That would be so fun to walk around and go, brah.
He loves doing it, but I don't like the cold weather at all. I loved getting out of Michigan.
So in your ideal world, hold on, I want to dive deep on this because this is kind of fun to me. In Brad Geiger's ideal world, if you could snap your fingers and didn't have to move, but all your material appeared in a new home, where would it be? Would you pick Arizona? Would you pick Florida? Would you pick California? Maybe down the street from me so we could be buddies? Where would you pick?
I got to be honest with you. It would be Philadelphia. And I'll tell you why.
Oh, God.
I'll tell you why.
What has happened in this conversation?
It would be Philadelphia. Well, because...
You have Stockholm Syndrome for Philadelphia now.
Because Philadelphia winters are not that bad. I mean, I don't go out and embrace them. It's still cold. But it's not freezing like Michigan or Chicago or Wisconsin. It's cold and man, we haven't had a bad winter around here for a long time, comparatively speaking.
I have to say though, in terms of Midwestern lake effect cold, when there was one winter in Notre Dame in Indiana where we would get lake effect in South Bend, and there was one winter where the lake effect was -30. And I remember I'm like, I'm gonna go to dining hall. And I walked out of my dorm to go to dining hall, and the edges of my eyes froze.
Yeah.
And it was painful as hell. I was like, I am not eating it. So I just didn't eat for a day and a half because I was like, I'm not going outside. This hurts.
Out there. But the one good thing that I can say about winter is that it kills all the bugs, all the mosquitoes. You don't have Philadelphia really is perfect because if you get much further south, then you've got bugs and snakes and reptiles all year round, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you get that one really nice, crisp winter weather for a couple months, kills all the bugs, kills all the mosquitoes, and then you start new again. And that's why it's Philadelphia for me, because if I go any further south, now I got to deal with spiders, scorpions I hear about in Arizona, lizards and snakes and all this stuff. Nah, I'll take my couple months of cold weather in Philadelphia and then get right back to living my life.
Okay, one more story before we launch into the show.
Yeah.
My mom and dad dropped me off in South Bend, right? And they give me like $75 and they say, buy yourself a winter coat because in California, to my mom's credit, she, being a loving mom, she grew up on the East Coast, right? Just outside of Boston.
Yeah.
It's new winters. All of my older 6 brothers and sisters grew up in winters and they knew how to deal with winter. Mm-hmm. I was like the young kid that only knew Southern California because the Navy had brought my dad out to Southern California. Anyway, long story short, my mom goes, here's $75. When winter comes, the stores will start carrying winter coats. There's none in Southern California. Get yourself one when you're there.
Yeah.
Okay, freshman year at Notre Dame, I don't have a lot of friends yet. She's like, just grab a friend. They'll tell you what to buy at the store.
Yeah.
So I go to Kmart or Sears or whatever, but I don't really have any friends in like November at this point. I have passing acquaintances freshman year.
But not close friends.
Not good enough. Where as an 18-year-old guy, I go, can you come buy a coat with me?
Right.
That kind of thing.
That's a hard ask. Yeah.
So this Californian goes into a Sears or a Kmart or whatever with his $75 in his pocket, and I buy a coat. Turns out you can't send a Southern California to buy a winter coat by themselves. I apparently bought, and I got made fun of it for 2.5 years until I went and bought a new one. This gigantic ass parka that went from it was like this Russian thing where it was like huge collar, straight all the way down to my ankles, but puffy, and then like had huge like fur things on either sleeve. I thought when I was buying the coat, I thought I was going to be living in Siberia. I don't know what I was thinking. I had never lived through a winter before, and I was like, I'm going to buy a coat. It was this gigantic half parka, half. What you look on your face? What is it?
Are you sure you were in the men's section?
No, I'm not, Brad.
You just described what I consider a woman's coat.
Yes, I think that's why I got made fun of for my first 2 years in Notre Dame. I'm not saying this jokingly. I am not convinced that I did not buy a woman's coat. I don't know. I didn't know how to I cannot emphasize how book smart world stupid I was at 18, 19 that I walked into a Sears and go, I need a coat, please, and just handed over $75 to whatever would fit me,
It was on Blue Light Special. Do you remember the Blue Light Special on Kmart's?
On that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about buying good coats and making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, who's always angling to get him to move to Southern California, which is why we had that whole opening segment. And I'm also the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and the co-director of Stripped.
And this week's hour of Comics is Vice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. But first, we want to give a shout out and a huge thank you to our friends over at Wacom at WACOM.com, the makers of the new Wacom One and sponsors of Comic Lab. Brad and I could not be happier with this sponsorship for the podcast because, they love the show, we love them, and we are legitimate users of Wacom. Both Brad and I have multiple Cintiqs around the studio and the Wacom One, and it has powered our careers. So we are super thankful for them for sponsoring the show and encouraging of you to check them out over at Wacom at WACOM.com.
Absolutely. And Dave, we've got a question from a Patreon backer that seems perfect since this show, if my calculations are correct, is coming out to the public on December 31st. It's New Year's Day. People are getting their New Year's preparations in order for tonight's party. Although with the pandemic, I don't know what kind of party it's going to be.
Hopefully nothing.
The rest of the world is going to party like Brad Geiger on New Year's.
Australia will party, but the rest of us will be hunkered down. Yeah.
Yeah. You can party like me. Just sit in front of the TV and wake up a couple minutes before the
otherwise
the
known as a
drops.
Brad Geiger winter. Now just sit here in front of the TV.
Full hibernation. But I do have a good question for today. This one's sent in to us from Mindy Indy, and Mindy says, how can you make 2021 a success? David Kellett, I ask you, how do you make 2021 a success?
I don't know if you saw my reaction, but I was just about to sip my coffee when you said, how do you make 2021 a success? And my expression, literally, Brad, was to put my coffee away and go, huh. I didn't sip my coffee because I had to go, huh. How do I make
better than doing a Danny Thomas spit take.
I think for me, we have to give ourselves, I think we have to be gentle on ourselves that we have lived through inarguably one of the shittiest points in not only the last 100 years, but in human history. This sucks. California had, and the west coast of the U.S. had massive fires. Australia had massive fires. There was a terrible presidential election in which the loser is not acknowledging his loss. There is a pandemic that's being handled terribly by a number of countries, ours very much included. And the tragedy of all the lives lost and the plans that had to change and be abandoned, all of that is very real. So the fact that we are surviving and managing to make art at all is an accomplishment, and so we should be kind to ourselves for that.
Yeah.
In 2021, I see in my own heart an increasing ray of hope as the anticipated vaccination rates by probably summer will be pretty strong, I think, by that point.
Yeah.
At least in the U.S. and in Europe. And so for me, my attitude for 2021 is be kind to myself as I climb out of a hole, basically. Brad, how about you?
Well, I think that's a really good game plan. Here's what I'm going to tell you. How can you make 2021 a success? I've got 2 steps for you, and it's super important because I think we talk about this incorrectly a lot of times. The first thing you've got to do if you want to make next year a success is to sit down and define what success is for you.
Right.
Because success for you is 100% different than what success is for Dave Kellett or what success is for Brad or Danielle or Erica or Keith. Everybody's got a different definition of what success is for them. And too often, I think we all accept shorthands for success in place of our success. In other words, well, I'll be successful when I am making a living from comics. That's great. That's fantastic. What does that actually mean?
Right.
What does that, I mean, it's amorphous and it's hard to hit a target that you haven't defined yet. Right?
Yeah.
You're taking a shot in the dark, literally. So what you need to do first, before you can even consider making 21 a success, is to sit down and as accurately and precisely and with as many details as possible, define what you would consider success. Then and only then can you start working towards it and making goals and making plans. But first things first, you've got to decide, and again, not accepting cloudy, these wavy lines in the air. Well, I'll be a professional cartoonist. No, that doesn't work. It really put down to the dollars, down to the decimals, down to the number of projects or whatever it is for you. And maybe it isn't. By the way, stop and think. Maybe it's got nothing to do with dollars at all. Maybe your success has nothing to do with dollars. And that's good. That's fantastic, right?
That was also some incredible ASMR right there. But I'd pay good money for that. Just have you every night as I'm falling asleep. Maybe it's not about dollars, David. Maybe it's about just going to sleep and resting your head. Maybe that's what it's about.
Maybe it's okay, Dave, if you've got a couple extra pounds. It's not a big deal.
Oh, Brad, you can fuck right off. That hit too close to home, Brad.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
That cut too deep too quick. You went right for the jugular with that on the ASMR joke.
Well, there was a lot of jugular to go for. So,
oh, God! God! God bless America. Jeez Louise.
No, but-
All right, that was funny.
Thank you. You've got to define success. Only then can you make a plan towards success. And Dave, our 1, 3, and 5 year plan show last year was really popular. So we're not dummies. We're going to do it again. So be listening for that. We're going to do another show where we talk about our own 1, 3, and 5 year plans, how those have changed, how we are going to try and approach them in the new year. But what I want you to do first, Mindy, is sit down and take a long, hard look at yourself and your life circumstances and so forth, and define for yourself what success is.
First of all, that's incredibly good advice. And we'll be using a version of that when we define our own 2021 and beyond goals in the upcoming show. And I would give you a couple metrics to judge by. I think money is a good one, actually. And I wouldn't necessarily disclude that. Disclude, is that a word? Disclude? I wouldn't.
I wonder if it's disinclude. That's a toughie.
Disinclude. Yeah, you might. Anyway, I wouldn't necessarily leave that to the side. I would include that. I would also include what your ideal time management is for a week. By that, you mean like, I wish I could spend 15 hours a week cartooning, or I wish I could spend 80 hours a week cartooning. It'll vary based on who you are. And then I would sort of, in a sort of Torty Robbins or Susan McTaggart sort of way.
Good Susan McTaggart's making
envision the projects that you would wish you were working on. Like, I wish I could do a fantasy comic, and I wish I could do a gag a day or a choke a joke comic.
A choke a joke.
I'm going to stick with that one. You know what? I'm not. No, that's a terrible phrase, and I don't want to popularize it. That was a joke. But visualize, and honestly, in a real Susan McTaggarty kind of way, visualize what your ideal life looks like. And write it down. I know that sounds stupid, but honestly, writing it down has a certain power because you'll revisit it. You'll post it up somewhere. Maybe you'll only look at it once every couple of months, but it'll bring you back to your basically core values of what you want for the future. But I will say this. One of the reasons why I led with be kind with yourself in this shitty situation is that I think a lot of us had to so reset our goals for 2021 that it's okay if for this past year and maybe for another 6 to 12 months, we're all kind of treading water.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is don't be a dick to yourself because that's all you can do. Like, that's all a lot of us can do is, like, if you can keep yourself from A, getting sick, and B, have some food on your table, that's enough at this point. And you made some art. Great. Good job. And then life will go back to normal. This is basically a bye year in sports analogies. We're all going to take a big bye on this year. And hopefully, like they did in the Roaring 20s, we will absolutely forget it once the flu of 1918 goes away.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, Dave. And I think that's important to, like you said, to be a little bit kind to your future self so that future self doesn't feel like a big failure. At the end of 2021, I think you've got to be a little bit realistic, and it. I don't know. I don't think it's bad to set high expectations for yourself, but also to be understanding that this is a year coming up that I don't think anybody should have high expectations. If you hit those high expectations, great, but be pragmatic, be realistic with yourself about what's going to happen this year. There's going to be a lot of upheaval again this year coming up in 2021.
And honestly, everyone should set their expectations that even in a world where the best of intentions are being met, the logistics of distributing a vaccine to hundreds of millions of people has never been done in such a short time span before. And from every product rollout ever, there's going to be hiccups, even with the best of intentions. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be supply shortfalls of either needles or vials or the vaccine itself. So we all just have to be like, well, it's going to take me another month to get vaccinated. Oh, it's going to take me another 3 months to get vaccinated. We're just going to have to roll with it. And so that's part of what I'm saying about be kind to yourself is we still have a ways to go before we're on the other side of this.
Absolutely. David, I've got another question from one of our Patreon backers, and I think you're going to love this. This comes in from Super D, and Super D says, "Hello, Mr. Geiger and Mr. Kellett. I have a question."
Formal.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Very, very.
I appreciate a formal question.
Yes. I've got to sit up in my chair to read this one. I have a question that's been eating me alive. Do you have anything about your art or art style that you want to consciously improve on? I'm aware that art improvements happen at a natural pace and instinctively, but have you ever looked at something related to your art and say, how do I change this now? In other words, what he's saying, David, as we've said on the show in the past, is that your style usually is something that you can't drive to. It's more something you see in the rearview mirror. He's saying there's something going on with my art that I want to change right now.
Right. I don't love it. Yeah.
And here's specifically what he's talking about. I'd love to learn to draw my characters' ears smaller. Sometimes when I look at how I draw them, they always feel like tumors on the side of their faces. How do I work on this? Am I just overanalyzing something that probably isn't even an issue? How do you do that? How do you take the reins and actively, consciously change your art style?
This is a great question. I remember this exact same feeling in my late teens and well into my 20s.
Oh, yeah.
With different things that I would draw. The main one being my character's eyes. I remember at some point becoming very dissatisfied because I sort of had, I think it was sort of a Doonesbury-esque style at first, where I would draw two teeny tiny little circles. Those were the pupils. And then, if you can imagine it, Brad, two parentheticals on the other sides, on each side of those circles.
Yep.
A la Gary Trudeau. And but mine was much more stylized. And looking back on it, I don't know what the hell I was thinking. I think I was trying to put a line in the sand of like, this is my style.
You were trying to stand out. Yeah.
Yeah. It was too much of a conscious choice of trying to stand out. Anyway, all that to say is it took me the better part of a year, but it was conscious choices of slowly evolving my style away. I kind of had a goalpost in mind of what I wanted the eye to look like eventually, but I knew I couldn't just snap my fingers and have a totally new style from Monday to Tuesday. So I slowly evolved it. That was one strategy I used. How about you, Brad? What would you recommend for somebody who consciously wants to reduce the size of their character's ears?
I would, so I remember back in the day, every now and again, you'd see a character sheet, and they use these in animation an awful lot, a character sheet where they'll draw the character from the front and from the side, maybe even do a full turnaround. But in these character sheets, there would always be these notes off to the side. Remember that the hair is black. Remember that, this person has two eyes, or whatever those notes were. There was always, They were always significant notes, not like the silly ones that I just said, but they were notes to help the other people who were going to come in and work on this project to draw this character correctly. And I always kind of rolled my eyes at these because the notes never seemed significant to me.
Right.
But the reason for that is that I wasn't trying to draw these. I was just reading it for funsies, right? Years later, I finally learned and had an appreciation for what these character sheets were trying to do. And that was obviously to bring other people in and indoctrinate them quickly so that they could hit the style on this character. They could keep them, to use the phrase, on model. That's what you have to do for yourself, Super. You've got to draw your character in the best possible way and finesse it to the point that this is the perfect drawing of this particular character from the front and from the side and so on and so forth. And then what you do for this ear problem that you're having, you actually figure out what is the perfect ear. And you do this in the same way that you measure a character's height by the number of heads. Right? You never measure a character's height by inches because inches are variable depending on how close or how far your camera is. That's why they use heads. How many heads tall is this character?
Right.
In the same way you're doing that, what I want you to do is maybe in the case of an ear, draw a line across from the eye and the mouth and say, is this ear inside those lines? Is it outside those lines? Is it more accurate to put the lines between the eye and the nose? How do you draw that ear in the correct size in relation to the rest of the head? Okay, and then whatever that is, you find a way that you can measure it and repeat that measurement time after time after time. And like I said, you're going to want to do it in relationship to the rest of the head, eyes and ears, and so on and so forth. or worst comes to worst, like 1/4 of the head height or something like that.
Yeah.
And then what you do is you draw a character sheet out, you make that note pointing in towards the ear because you know that's a sore spot with you. You want to put it out there and then hang that somewhere in your work area so that every time you're drawing this character, you can just glance up and get a real quick refresher course, put it fresh in your memory so that when you're drawing it, you can put that ear in at the right space the first time.
Right. Just a point of correction. If you were drawing a human face accurately, the top of the ear is roughly aligned with the eyebrow. Mm-hmm. The connection of the top of the ear, like if you feel where the ear connects to the face, is roughly aligned with the pupil, right? Mm-hmm. And then the bottom of the ear is roughly aligned with the tip of the nose. Or the bottom, is it called the bridge of the nose? What is this called?
Bridge. No, bridge is up here.
Bridge is up here. What is this part called?
That's your honker right there.
Oh, great.
I don't know what it's
called.
We're
using science.
Nostril. Anyway, nostril. That'll work.
Exactly. The bottom of the ear is aligned roughly to the nostril. Now, listen, that's the accurate way to do it. But of course, comics are all about exaggeration and hyperbole, but it's also about where do you want to put the focus, right?
Right.
And we're all choosing what to emphasize. So for Mickey Mouse, it's the ears. Obviously, no mouse has ears like that, but they're choosing to make those hyperbolic. I'm trying to think of literally any other character. For Opus, it's the nose, which is ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
For Snoopy, it's the nose, which is ridiculous. So right now, what you're seeing as a cartoonist is that you're looking at your character going, no, the ear is claiming too much visual real estate.
Right.
Like you could obviously have a Mickey Mouse character that has giant ears, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody would question that. But you as the artist is saying, no, this is claiming more than I want to give it.
Yeah.
So you want to actively reduce that size, like Brad said, by charting it out on a turnaround for a character sheet. That's a great way to look at it from different angles. Because you might, if you're like any of us, you probably have a default one that you draw at, like a 3/4 angle or a profile, right? A lot of us tend to draw towards that when we start off in our career. So if you're by doing the turning around, you'll see, oh God, as you're turning the character around, this ear is gigantic. I've got to reduce this in size. And it'll help you, to Brad's point, bring it down in size, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just doing a character turnaround is a great idea in general. I mean, it's something that my characters have changed so much over time that I'm really kind of overdue to do another character turnaround.
Yeah.
And at this point, my colorist, Alex Heberling, she kind of made a comment one time, and I was actually paying attention. I feel very proud of myself. But she said, when you introduce a new character, it would be really helpful if you could give me a really quick character turnaround, because a lot of times, all of a sudden I'm drawing this character from the back, and I have no idea what you want going on there. Right. Because you just introduced the character. I don't know anything about this character. So it would help me, she said, to plan what my colors are going to be, and also help me to stay on model, because I'm infamous for giving somebody a belt in panel 1 and no belt in panel 2 and suspenders in panel 3.
That happens with Beth all the time. She'll email me back and be like, so you're missing his shoes in panel 3. I'll be like, oh, totally forgot. Oh, let me go redraw that.
Constantly. So those turnarounds are really, really good tools. And by the way, it's something fun. It's something you can post for your Patreon backers just as an extra. It's something that is worth spending the time on.
So can I ask you, why am I the same person as you in that when I was younger, also strongly resisted turnarounds as being like, that's for animators. That's not for me. I don't need to do that. Was it, I'm going to be honest, part of it, I think, was like, that seems like a lot of drawing. I don't want to do all that. That seems like wasted drawing. I want to create a comic. I don't want to create turnarounds, Like that to me felt like an hour of work what did I gain at the end of that? Well, the older me would say what you gain at the end of that is an understanding of the physics of your character. Yes. And frankly, having done a turnaround recently of an alien that I was trying to design, you actually come up with better solutions, Brad, for the way to design them. From even like, say, if you prefer the 3/4 or the profile or the straight on shot, and you're probably never going to see them from behind, okay, that's fine. But having drawn them from behind, you see how the rolls on their neck work, or you see how the scales on their arm work, or you see how their claws work, or whatever the creature is. You're like, oh, okay, now I get it. I understand this character better having drawn it from behind and from a 3/4 turn.
I'll tell you why we didn't like turnarounds. There was no punchline in a turnaround.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. There was no satisfactory, like, I'm done with the thing, and here it is, world.
And here's the punchline, and now I can show it to someone and see if that makes them laugh. That's what brought you and I to comics in the first place, is to do that.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't like turnarounds. There was no punchline. There was no moment of closure. It was a strictly academic thing. That if I had had a mentor in my life at that point who would have said, you need to do this, they would have been doing me a big favor. But the other thing is, Dave, you and I were making this stuff up as we went along in the early 2000s.
Yes.
Flying by the seat of our pants. And again, we had to do a comic every day because that's what the web publishing landscape required. And we were so busy trying to hit that next 24-hour deadline that we didn't have time to sit there and monkey around with a turnaround. We had another deadline.
One of the best analogies, and it's useful in a million situations, but you can say that while we were coming at that first decade of our cartooning, we were building the airplane as we were flying it, you know?
Yes.
And I always find that to be such a helpful way of looking at a project that's being figured out while you're doing it. Mm-hmm. Because we didn't have time for all the, wouldn't it be nice if we had turnarounds? And wouldn't it be nice if I designed a color family? Or if I, like all the stuff that you should do when you're designing a new project that Nickelodeon or Pixar do, and they take a moment and they do the turnarounds, they do the character studies, they do the lighting studies, they do the color studies. We didn't do any of that because it's like, I got another comic due tomorrow. I'll figure it out as I'm doing it, That's
why I'm passionate about telling young people today, or people just starting out today, that they don't have to cargo cult that mentality from 2000 through 2010. They don't have to do that. You've got a completely different publishing landscape, and it actually has an awful lot of benefits built into it for you.
What do you know? Describe, because I want to clarify. What do you mean by they don't have to cargo cult what? They don't have to cargo cult Pixar, or they don't have to cargo cult what we did?
They don't have to cargo cult that idea of having a daily deadline. This has to come out every day. It doesn't. Yeah. And in fact, in a lot of ways, I still strongly believe it is best to have a certain day that thing uploads and outputs, to have that sense of, it's Tuesday, so I'm going to get a Sheldon, right?
Right.
But if you miss that, it's not the end of the world. You don't owe a big mea culpa on Twitter and all this other stuff. I'm missing my update today. I'm sorry, I had the flu and I did this and I did that. You should just keep your mouth shut, work on the comic, and update it on Wednesday. And chances are nobody's going to know the difference because, big surprise, they've all got their own lives.
Yeah.
Then they're not sitting there ticking you off like a checklist.
The alternate too is also a possibility, and I remember a conversation we had with Scott Kurtzgott maybe a decade ago, where we all kind of agreed that the way we would experiment as cartoonists is in the daily strip.
Yes.
So, Super, one thing you can do is you can kind of tinker with tomorrows and just see if you like the ear on that one. Don't like that one? Try it again on Wednesday. Try it again on Thursday.
Yep.
And you'll slowly figure it out. But as you do, and also, by the way, a sneaky little thing you can do in the comic is you can work in turnarounds into different panels if you need it, like have someone strongly in the foreground but turned around. Use those Wally Woods 21 panels that work or 22 panels that work to try to experiment with slow turnarounds of characters over the next couple months, and you'll find that eventually you'll have a full character turnaround sheet. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. Oh, hey, Brad, I had a fun idea that I wanted to run by you.
Yeah.
I think it's a fun idea. So do you remember the famous story about how Charles Schultz, somewhere in the 60s or 70s, he had a famous nib that he used, the number 914 radio nib by Esther Brooks company. They're now defunct, so no one's heard of them anymore. But anyway, those were his favorite nibs. Like, he could draw the heck out of peanuts as long as he had those nibs. So when they went under, he bought out all the remaining stock of that nib. And bless him, up until his death, Jeannie actually showed me when we were touring around, he still had a closet full of those nibs on his deathbed. Not a ton, but like a good-sized box of nibs left over. And in sort of a fun way, she would give out the nibs to people that came. Anyway, long story short is, he, had the wherewithal, he had the money, Lord knows he had the money, and also he had the love for an art supply that he was like, they're going broke? I'm buying up all the stock then, right?
Yeah.
So here's my question to you, Brad. What key component of your art, a certain type of paper, a certain type of pen, certain type of eraser, a device, a scanner, a Wacom, what would it be that if you knew that it was going away, that you would buy 15 of them so that you could always have them in your art career?
Man, I got to be honest with you. I'm pulling a complete blank because since I work digitally, I like working on my Wacom. I like working on my Cintiq. But that's something that's going to, I couldn't imagine stockpiling Cintiqs, especially because the way technology updates, I could stockpile them, but then are they going to be useful with the next versions of the operating system that I use roll out 10 years down the line?
Right.
So it's not useful to stockpile that kind of technology. And since I don't use, in fact, my inability to get consistent Bristol board was one of the main things that drove me to digital in the first place.
Yeah, I remember that when they started changing the formula about 5-6 years ago, right? Or maybe longer.
Longer than that. Than that. But it was like, this is crazy. I would buy really expensive Bristol board and it would be spongy and gross. And why am I doing this? It was one of the main reasons that drove me to digital. So I don't have an answer for you. What would your be in terms of stockpiling? What would your number one implement be?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for yes-anding and playing that game. That was really fun to hear your response. That was great fun for everybody.
What was I supposed to make something
Brad,
up?
if you had to pick a favorite color, what's your favorite color? Well, I got to tell you, I celebrate the entire spectrum, and so no favorite color for Brad. Brad finds no particular joy in any one specific color.
I hate every last color there is, except for puce. I've always had a little bit of a fondness for puce.
What? Who was sitting around going, you know what would be a great name for this? Puce. How can we get so close to puke but not actually say puke? Let's say puce. That's great.
Take that hard K and make it into a C and you're home free.
Good job, Francois. All right, we're calling it puce. All right, so for me, I still relish, and like you, I drive entirely digitally. I love the what I can do digitally. And in fact, I clean up and color Sheldon digitally, so that is also true. But for me, the tactility of Sheldon, of still getting to draw ink on paper, there was something so pleasurable still to me in that act that, but it's very specific. If you give me the wrong kind of paper or the wrong kind of pen, I'm like, nah, I don't want to do this. No, this is not right. It's like riding a bike that doesn't quite fit you, if that makes sense, if that analogy works for people. So, remember when you were a kid and you had to borrow an older brother or sister's bike and it was too big for you? And how you kept catching the bar in the groin? That was not a fun way to bike.
No, that was horrible. And or you'd always, you when you had to come to a stop, your feet wouldn't reach the ground and you'd just topple over.
Yeah, you topple over. You both catch it in the groin and topple over. So you get the 1-2 punch of personal pain and social pain.
Yes.
It's also funny when you're a giant adult now and you have to borrow like an 8-year-old's bike.
Yeah, and your knees
it's like a clown car.
Yep.
You're going with the knees going out to the side, trying not to hit the handlebar. Anyway, now I forgot what I was talking about.
What are you going to stockpile there?
Oh, yeah. For me, I think it would be, here, I'm going to reach for one and show you. It would be this little baby, the Micron Pigma pens.
Really?
The whole line. I celebrate the entire collection of the Micron Pigmas. The fluidity of a Micron Pigma across a Bristol vellum paper is so sweet to me. I
Yes.
love that feeling so much, but only when it's fresh. There comes a point in the pen where it starts to turn and the ink stops flowing. So I'm cheap enough where I'll keep using it because I know there's more ink in it, but it is not the tactility, I don't want to make it sound sensual, but the sensuality of the ink like dries up, and now why are you giving me that look? I'm sorry I used the word sensual. I take that back immediately.
I just love that. I don't want to make this sound sensual, but the sensuality. It's like, well, you're doing a horrible job of not making it sound sensual if you're going to keep that word.
I'm not saying sensual in the terms of sexual, but sensual in terms of sensory. Like
sensory.
The sensory feedback of a somewhat drying out pen across paper is shitty. It's nails on chalkboard shitty for an artist. But when the ink is flowing, if I had endless money, I would like Jerry Lewis with socks. I would have a new pen every day. You know.
Yeah, and those microns, I used to use them all the time when I was doing physical work with pen and ink, and they're wonderful. I love them, but they are a little on the expensive side. So I would always push mine a little bit beyond what I should have been pushing them until the line was starting to suffer, and then I had to finally throw it away and get the next one out.
Can I tell you? Here's an example of my cheapness hoisting me by my own petard here. So I found an art company online that like those pens, to your point, are expensive. They're like $3.50, sometimes $4 a pop. Yeah. At least in the U.S. And I found a company that if you bought them in bulk, you could get them for $2, right?
Yeah.
And so Johnny Saves a Buck over here was like, I'm going to buy a whole bunch of them. And the first 20, great. Next 20, great. Still had about 60 to go. They're all dried out on me, Brad.
No.
What a tremendous waste of money I had. Oh, boy, Brad, I learned a lesson.
I didn't even know that could happen. You kept the caps on them, didn't you?
I kept the caps on them. I don't know.
You were over there snipping them in between
how
panels.
How fast can you use a pen? Some of these ones have been sitting on my shelf now for 2 years, and it's like, oh, they're not so good no more.
That's unbelievable.
And by the way, that's official English. They're not so good no more. Good job, Dave.
You know who you hear this conversation about, or you know who you hear having this conversation? People who like to ink with brushes. This just came up not so long ago. Some Facebook group that I was looking in on, they were talking about the Winsor & Newton sable brushes.
The sables. Oh, they're so delicious.
But here's so I don't know how verifiable this is. These were artists much better than I.
No, I know where you're going. It's verifiable. I know where you're going.
But what they were saying is that, number one, the person making the post was saying, the younger generation, sometimes people will say, oh, this brush is just as good as a Winsor & Newton sable, and they'll never know what they're missing because they don't want to buy that Winsor & Newton sable. And there's nothing as good as a Winsor & Newton sable was this person's point. And somebody else came in and said, no, you're wrong, because due to global warming, sable hair doesn't have the same texture and doesn't have the same consistency that it did back in the day when we were all raised on these brushes.
Right,
and
the
quality, this other person said, the quality in their estimation of the new sables was not as good, and it really comes down to climate change.
Well, as someone who loves, whenever I ink with a brush, to use a Winsor & Newton Sable number 7. Oh, mwah, so delicious, that brush. I can verify that, but I think the truth is both what you said, but also something different. In the U.S., as far as I know, sable brushes are now outlawed because of
really.
It's not so nice for the sable, basically. If you use the sable, basically the farming and gathering of sable hair was not so kind, and so the U.S. outlawed it. So I have artist friends who. They're like going on the dark web trying to find a sable brush from Britain or something like that. Got to get that Winsor & Newton, that sweet, sweet sable. They're meeting a guy in a back alley like, hey, what do you got for me? I got 10 Winsor & Newton sables. Here you go. Here's $7,000.
Wow. I didn't even know that there was a black market for
as
sable
far as
brushes.
I know. I might be misremembering my facts, but I'm pretty sure that they are still legal in the UK and I think in New Zealand. And so people will buy them via third-party websites or smaller art sellers that will ship to the U.S. because we're not allowed to have them anymore. So the Winsor & Newton, I think the Winsor & Newtons that we get in the U.S. are made of a different material, which is why your story might be true, because it is not what we remember when we were younger artists.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I could see stockpiling those if I was a brush person. Man, I never had the patience to learn how to ink with a brush, but I sure do enjoy it when I see it.
Well, for me, I tell you what, nothing can do organics like a brush can. If I'm doing a tree, oh man, a brush is so good, so delicious.
Absolutely. So, Dave, we've got another question coming in from a $5 Patreon backer, and I wanted to bounce this off you. What do you think?
Yeah.
This comes in from A. Manzo, and they say, hey, fellas, how soon is too soon to consider printing your own comic? I have already had followers ask for a floppy, but I don't want to put the cart before the horse. Thank you both for your encouragement and advice. You gave me the courage to finally start.
That's great. Hey, that's great. Let's focus on that last sentence first. That's great.
Yes.
That's great. So this is a great question, and it comes back to one of our perennial things, which is, when do I start making merch?
Yeah.
Right? I'm starting to get a following. People are asking me unprompted for this thing, a T-shirt, a mug, a magnet, a calendar, a book, in this case, a floppy. When do you do it? The answer is in the fact that you are emailing us asking if you're ready. And that itself is telling you that you might not be ready. I'll tell you why. It has to be so overwhelming, and your desire to do it so overwhelming, that you're ready to plunk down $500, $1,000, $2,000, whatever it's going to cost you to do this print run. And it's also going to be the surety that you are getting enough emails that you know for a fact that you can at least cover your costs in making those books, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that you're like, I'm getting an email, Brad and I know that is an email. Like, I'm getting some emails. Now it's 2 emails, right? Like, I've had a couple people email me. All right, now it's 3. That's fine. We get what you're, but like,
because we did the same thing. Let's be honest, we did the same thing. I'm getting all these emails.
I'm saying that not critically. I'm saying that not critically. I still get that right now, where I will get an email or 2 for a comic saying, hey, can you make this into a special print? And sometimes Beth and I will pull up a chair and go, all right, now hold on. A, do we like this enough to make it a print? B, do we know we can sell this down at future Comic-Cons or on the site? And C, how much is this person's enjoyment just this first reading of it? But when they read it 5 more times, are they going to really want the print? All right, no, then we're not going to do this print, right?
Yeah.
And so a part of it is you have to judge the sincerity of the emails that you're getting, which probably, let's just be generous, they're probably super sincere. But you also have to judge the volume of it. You also have to judge your ability to sell them on, both in future Comic-Cons or online. So it's a big commitment when you do it. And that's why I say, like, the world will still be here. Give it another 6 months, give it another 12 months, and then look at it again and see how you're feeling about it. Brad, what do you think?
Well, remember Geiger's first law of merchandising. The person to ask for the T-shirt is the first person to disappear when the T-shirt comes out. And that's an immutable law of independent.
Yeah, that is like a fixed law of physics. Newton forgot to write that one down, but that one was on there.
It's always going to be that way, but that's not to put you down. So let's talk about this. When is the right time? How do you know the right time is here? Well, obviously you don't, but I've got lots of thoughts for you. First of all, I would not start with a floppy. I think that's a huge waste of time. Okay. Number one, because it's going to have a really low return on investment in terms of your profit margin. You're gonna print these things up. You're only going to be able to sell them for a few bucks a piece. Even if you buy a whole lot and you're making a couple bucks a throw for these floppies, it's not going to be a very a great use of your time.
Right.
And obviously, as an independent, your time is limited. So
can I jump in, Brad? Just because I want to underline some more things. By the way, I completely forgot to mention that I wouldn't do a floppy either. So Brad's right on with this. Also, the paper quality in a floppy, not as good as what you would do in a bound book, so it's not going to age well.
Right.
Because a floppy doesn't have a binding that can support it, they don't store well. And then also, there's the market and the audience for floppies kind of is disappearing.
Yeah.
So even if you can get it out to a show, people are like, I don't really want to get a floppy. And to Brad's main point, the return is not there for you. If it costs you X amount and the price is 2 times X, that's not enough of a return for that book to have been worthwhile, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about next steps. First of all, what can you do when you've got enough comics or enough backlog that you can actually put together a good-sized, decent-sized graphic novel, right? What would you say, Dave, by the way, good-sized graphic novel? For me, the number always seems to hover around 80 and above for a nice, thick book. You don't want your book to be thin.
No, I have. You can always cheat it by buying a thicker paper so it feels better,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm not even joking about that. You can do that. But for me, I always think the 100 to 120 page is the minimum-ish, Brad. But maybe 80. But 80 has a little bit more of a floppy feel, which is okay. But somewhere around 100, 120, a book gets a little bit sturdier. I don't know. It's so much of this is just the weird subjectiveness of holding that book in your hand and going, this feels like enough.
This feels like a book. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's say you've got enough that you can actually put your graphic novel out. You've got a lot of things that you can play with. If this is your very first one, and you just want to see if the demand is actually there, you've got a couple ways to go, and I think they're both kind of equally valid. I can completely understand if you want to go print on demand for your first book, just to gauge if there's a demand. All right.
Right.
I don't say print on demand is the first thing you want to grow out of as quickly as you can, because you have almost no profit margin in print on demand. The quality can be kind of variable. There's a lot of problems with print on demand.
But you're testing that market. And more important than anything else, I'm just going to jump in because this will give you firsthand ability to test Geiger's first law of merchandising. Those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say 40 people that emailed you saying, I want a floppy. Now you can email them and go, here is the book. Bing, bang, boom, ready to go, right? You took a day, you put it together in PDF form, printable PDF form. It's set up on the print on demand system. And guess what's going to happen? You're going to see Brad Geiger's first law of merchandising in effect for yourself. And God, is that a good learning experience?
Yeah, it really is. But at the very worst, you get a copy of your book out of it, because you're going to want to buy one for yourself just to make sure you get to do quality control and so forth. So you're going to buy one for yourself. You're going to hold that in your hands. There's something valuable about that.
Yeah.
There's something significant in that moment. But you're not going to want to. You don't want to stay at print on demand for longer than like your first book or your first couple books. After that, you're in a real bad way there. So then, after you've proven to yourself that there's a significant demand there, then your next step is Kickstarter. Again, you never want to put your own money down on this. You don't want to dip into your pocket for a book run. Ever. You don't want to dip into your pocket. You put that sucker up there on Kickstarter, and remember what I always tell you, Kickstarter is free market research. You put that up there after you've done your math, done your homework. What's it going to cost to print this book? Who are you going to print it with? What are your expenses? So on and so forth. And we've got lots of resources available for you on the ComicLab Patreon, on the ComicLab Discord server. There's lots of ways that we can help you through that, because it's daunting the first time.
Oh, yeah.
But you put that out on Kickstarter and you give it a whirl. And if it doesn't go, fine. There's nobody's out there taking notes on your life. If your Kickstarter doesn't go, they'll forget about it.
And even though you might feel embarrassed or wounded, no one else is looking at you like that. All of us are rooting for you. Everyone wants to see you succeed. But no one's going like, oh boy, look at Susan and Greg. Their Kickstarter didn't go, ha ha ha. It's not like grade school, you know?
Well, remember in grade school, you've got, this is really important, looking back over your life. And tell me if this happens to you, Dave. 2:00 in the morning, you're staring at the wall. You remember that one time in 5th grade where you did the most horribly embarrassing, humiliating moment, and you torture yourself with it because that's what your brain does at 2:00 in the morning. If you went back to all those other people from 5th grade and said, "Boy, do you remember that one time that I did such and so?" I guarantee you they weren't paying attention. They don't remember it. They were too busy remembering their own humiliating moment.
Right.
A failed Kickstarter, quote unquote failed, is the same thing. Nobody's paying attention. And if they do, they're going to forget about it in a couple of weeks. They're going to go on with their own lives. Put that thing out on Kickstarter. If it goes, it goes. And you got a whole new set of problems you get to solve. If it doesn't, that's fine. Go back to the drawing board. try to learn some things about why it may have failed, or all the things that went on during that time that you can learn from your Kickstarter, and then live to kickstart another day.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll leave you with one last thought, which is the first time that you do this, I think it's okay to shoot for the goal of just recouping your costs.
Yeah.
And that's because you're basically getting a real world schooling in how to create a book. And the next time you'll do better at covers, the next time you'll do better in your interiors, and in the ordering quantities, in the way that you ship and store it, all the sort of things that you can only learn by doing the thing. So if your goal for this first book, and like Brad, I wouldn't necessarily recommend a floppy, but let's just say that you're going to do a trade paperback a year from now. That'll get you a higher margin, a higher profit level, all that sort of stuff. When you do it, it's okay to just shoot for costs recovered, right? Because you learned, you know what to do, you have a better sense of how big your personal market is, how big your audience is, and how much they'll support, which means your ordering will be more on target for your second book. And then you can adjust both your pricing, your strategy, and your materials used. And for round 2, you'll be ideally better set for the next one. Don't you think, Brad?
Yes and no. Yes
and no. Okay.
You should shoot for costs. But what I want you to do, if you're going to take Dave's advice, still add on maybe another $1,000 or another $500, so you're not just squeaking by. Because if it's your first Kickstarter, you will have done some of the math wrong. If it's your first Kickstarter, you will be making mistakes along the way. You're going to need a little buffer money in there.
Well,
so give yourself a little cushion there.
Yes. In fact, Brad is right about that. As I have always said before, my own personal back of envelope math, I always try to do my book bringing in a profit of 5 times my cost, right? And the reason I do that, actually, I've had a really painful real-world example of that this year. I just kickstarted a book which, both in the print run and in the shipping, has had hiccups that I've never had before. It's a very 2020 problem.
Yeah.
And I basically took a hit on both of those in ways that I'd never have before. But thank God that I had built in these margins, Brad, because at least I'm still coming out of it profitable, having taken 2 bad hits on both the production and on the shipping. Really bad hits. At least I will make money off of it. It's not like I'm going to, God forbid I would lose money, but it's still painful, this adjustment of what my hopes were versus what 2020 actually handed me in terms of the success of this project. But to your point, I had built in enough margins where even with those 2 additional hits that I had not projected in my math, I'm still making a profit on it. So that's that. To Brad's point, Brad is smarter. Listen to Brad, not me.
I got a question for you, Dave. This is not on the show list for today. You ship something to somebody overseas, we'll say Germany.
Yeah.
And this person bought a large number of books through my Kickstarter. Cost me $60 to $70. We'll call it $65 to ship.
Yep.
I saw it. I was watching it. They tried to deliver it on the 17th, and then nothing. It shows back up on my doorstep saying unable to be delivered. I get an email from the person saying we got the same message. We've been here the whole time. If somebody tried to deliver it, it's news to us, and they could have delivered or tried it again. Yada yada yada. What do you do in a situation like that? Do you eat that $65 and send it to them a second time?
This is a really hard question.
Yeah, I know it is.
In the U.S.,
because they made a big order.
In the U.S., I would eat the cost and probably resend it if it was with all good intention.
Yeah.
But frankly, I don't get a lot of returns. For all its faults, the U.S. postal system actually really works 99% of the time. It's actually really quite incredible.
Yeah.
But there are some countries that I don't ship to anymore for this very reason. I have a lot of readers in Brazil. I stopped shipping to Brazil because packages would go stolen or get lost a lot, and they would get misdelivered a lot. And so I eventually was just like, this is getting too expensive. I'm losing money shipping to Brazil. Germany has a really efficient postal service, as do most of the European destinations. Aside from Italy, I found a lot of problems shipping to Italy. But anyway, what was I going to say? So this solutions that I've done in the past would be to say, I can't for good business. I'm not Walmart. I can't afford to send this to you again. to the same address, especially, first of all, you have to give me a second address where we can figure out where you're going to sign for it or receive it. Second, I might say something like, would you be willing to cover the cost? Sometimes people are. Would you be willing to go halvesies on the cost? Sometimes people are. Or I just take the loss in the original sale and say, I guess I can't deliver to Germany for this address. I'm going to refund you the order. And then I've only taken a loss for the $65 shipping, right?
Yeah.
I've done that. I've done every one of those, and none of them are satisfactory to me. Aside from when they pay for the shipping, I will say that's satisfactory.
Yeah.
But it's shitty. It's shitty when it happens. I hate it. That's one of the few things that I really dislike about shipping internationally is when a package goes stolen or lost or misdirected or gets returned.
Yeah.
I had an original art package to Saudi Arabia, and the guy bought 4 pieces of original art, and I got it back in the mail. I'm not kidding. 9 months later, beat to shit, it said package undeliverable. I was like, where have you been? My friend, what journey as a package have you been on these last 8 months? What took so long? Anyway, the guy was very nice. He's like, I don't know what happened. Why don't we send it to my business address versus my home address? He paid for the shipping, and I shipped it out again, and it got there. But I don't know what happened to that package for 8 months, and also what a bummer. But anyway, there's that. So as far as your real world question, Brad, I would reach out to them, and in those moments, I try to be human about it. Say, look, I'm an artist. I'm not Amazon. This cost me $65 to ship it to the first time, which you had paid for. But if we're going to try this again, you've got to give me another address, and it's got to be one where we will know that it will arrive. And secondly, I don't know that I can afford to pay for this shipping at $65.
It's a
USD.
hit. It's a real hit. I'm telling you. So listen, Dave, I've got one more Patreon question I'd like to get to today. This one comes in from Eddie DeAngelini. And Eddie says, I do a weekly webcomic that is posted on my socials every Sunday morning, just like the Sunday newspaper funnies. I've been posting on Sunday mornings for several years. Only recently I am questioning if this is a poor strategy. In your combined experiences, what do you consider the best days and times to post?
Okay, so I think this is a great question. I think undeniably Sunday is a bad day on social media.
Oh, my God.
I think the weekends in general are bad because even if you tell yourself, people will see it Monday. No, not really. There are people that, and they're not me, but there are people that follow hundreds of accounts. And so like Brad always says, it just gets filtered to the bottom of that fish tank by the time they check back in on Monday morning.
Yeah.
You are so far down that only if they're bored and waiting at a doctor's office are they going to go flipping through those thousands of messages that they missed over the weekend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Remember that other people's Twitter habits are not yours, first of all, right? Secondly, I think any day of the week during the weekday would be better. No matter what time you post it would be better. But the specific times that I would say for the U.S. are between 10 and 3 a.m. Pacific time. So that would be 1 to 6 p.m. East Coast time. And there are a lot of studies on this. Like, for example, when my wife when Sony Pictures used to ask her to post about a TV show, it was always at either 10 a.m. or 3 p.m. 3 p.m. on the West Coast tends to be a successful time because you're getting people on the West Coast that are bored at work or bored with work, and on the East Coast that have just gotten off work. So they just took their shoes off, they're back at home, and they're... anyway, those tend to be some successful times. Brad, what do you think? Sunday mornings, good time to post?
No, I'm a little bit old school when it comes to this because when we first started out, the weekends were where the internet went to die. You'd post something on the weekend and nobody would see it. And I think with social media, there's a lot more kind of
better
activity
than it was when we were younger. Yeah. Agreed.
But also, this has become my Niagara Falls. The first thing I see in this question, I post it every Sunday morning, just like the Sunday newspaper funnies, and I go back to that rant from like the show before last, where I was like, "That's 40 years out of date. You've got no excuse."
Right.
This has become my Niagara Falls. It just sets me off. Please don't do your publishing strategy based on the newspapers. There's nothing that is more out of touch and 40 years out of touch. So I would get away from the weekend. I like posting. We always have a little disagreement on this. I like posting at about 11:30 East Coast time because that's the people on the West Coast. They're eating breakfast and they might be looking at it. It's around lunchtime. People are starting to wind down for their lunch break on the East Coast, and it's dinner time over in like London. So I've always kind of ventured towards 11:30 or so East Coast time.
Well, you know what? I will agree with you on this regard. Is that it's funny that you should mention 11:30 because I always try to time my eBays to end at noon West Coast time because people are on their lunch break, which is 4 o'clock East Coast time. People are in the last hour of work and kind of scrolling their phone, and then that's 8 p.m. on most of Western Europe. And so all three of my major bidders on eBay stuff. A noon Pacific time post tends to work well. So even though Brad and I are big proponents of there's no magic hashtag, there are better times to post than others, inarguably, right?
Yeah, and I think any day during the week, if you've got by the way, I'm just going to flip over all the cards here. We know Eddie. Eddie runs a comic shop. Okay, his comic is about like Marvel and DC comics culture. Why he's not updating this on Wednesday when the new comics come out, I have no idea.
Maybe because he's busy with New Comic Day, but yes, I take your point, though.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he's doing this at least 24 hours in advance.
Yeah, you can schedule it, certainly, yeah.
But New Comics Day on Wednesday is still a thing. And and that has something to do with the culture that you're trying to swim in and the things that you're trying. That would be a great time to use this comic as a way to draw attention to your comic shop and the other things you've got for sale. Why you're not doing it on Wednesday, I have no idea. Sunday has nothing to do with you. Wednesday is all about your business.
Why do you think humans do that, where we're always fighting the last war?
Oh my gosh. Like yes, very much so.
You know what I mean? Like we're publishing for newspaper, the fun of the Sunday comics. Like the whole reason why they had Sunday comics was as a marketing scheme for a very specific type of way of selling newspapers, right? Where you could bundle certain things for the weekend to get people to buy a higher price newspaper and make a bigger margin. And so to me, whenever someone is organizing, and I'm guilty of this kind of stuff too. I still fight the last war in some of the things that I do in my business. I admit that I do it, but it's weird how our minds can't adapt to a world that has changed. Like we still in our language say like, I'm blowing off a head of steam, or I'm picking up steam, or I'm going to blow my stack, or I'm going to, like, why do we still use steam references? When the last time in your life, Brad, did you have steam in any way in your life? And yet we still say like, oh, look at Mr. blowing off steam over here. Like, who's blowing off steam? There's no steam.
Right. Yeah. And why does he have such a one-track mind?
Yeah. Yes.
Frankly.
It's weird, though, that we keep the paradigm, even though the thing that created the paradigm is gone.
Yeah.
So, like, newspapers, for all intents and purposes, are effectively gone for most people's lives.
Yeah.
And yet we keep this paradigm of, like, Sunday is the day for color, or Sunday is the day for the big comic.
Sunday's the day that everybody read comics, right? Back 40 years ago. You know, if they weren't reading it in the daily, they were reading it in the Sunday. I don't
But
get
I think part of the... The older I get, the harder it's becoming, inarguably. But one of the things that I've tried to do in my career is say, like, if I were going to design this whole cloth right now, how would I design a comics career? Yeah. And I would do X, I would do Y, I would do Z. The thing that I'm personally failing on, and I'm increasingly realizing this, is that I need to go where the kids are, Brad. No, but I need to do a better job of panel by panel vertical scroll display in my career. I've been reticent about this, but I see this in my 46-year-old self. Mm-hmm. I need to be better about this. It's a little bit dangerous that I'm saying to myself, it's fine. I don't need to make that change. I do need to make that change. I need to, at some point, figure out a panel-by-panel or vertical scroll display, because that's how people are reading on the phones going forward, you know?
What am I missing? I thought you made that switch a long time ago. I've been singing your praises to other people.
No, I mean, specifically, I have to go to that Webtoonsy kind of, maybe even by bringing it to those Korean-based systems. Yeah. Like I used to be on Go Comics, I had that, but I'm like, maybe I need to switch it around and bring a mirrored Sheldon or a mirrored Drive over to that Drive specifically is not vertically oriented and is not panel by panel. But I think I could actually do pretty well if I brought it over to one of those Korean platforms vertically oriented.
And it's so easy to do as long as you don't have diagonal gutters, which is a topic that I've got on our list to talk about next in the next month or so. As long as you don't have diagonal gutters, and by the way, why would you have diagonal gutters? if you're doing a pretty straightforward page layout, you could take all of those rectangles, crop them individually, put them in a vertical scroll, and you're done. That's what I do for Evil Ink. I do a traditional comics layout, except I just keep I don't allow myself any diagonal gutters, so no triangular panels or trapezoids. And I just crop each one of the rectangles, or in some cases circles, and I put it out. And by the way, since doing that, I've been able to offer my ebooks and my e-comics in both a traditional full-page PDF and in a smartphone edition where they get it on their phone, and it's a vertical scroll all the way throughout the entire book. They can read the entire thing on their phone. It's a fantastic value add, and if you're doing it from square one, pun intended, it's very easy to implement.
Yeah. But this is me saying, in especially in light of this question, which I think is a totally valid one, which is when the paradigm has changed, all of us, myself included, it takes time to catch up with that paradigm change, and you have to be on top of it. And this is me admitting publicly, I have not been on top of this paradigm change. The other big one, as everyone famously knows, is I have not made the paradigm switch to Clip Studio Paint. Which everyone says is inarguably a better way to make comics. I, for some reason, am old manish about it. Like, I don't want to change.
I know.
And it really is. It's a fear of change. And it's hard to break out of that because it's A, more work, and it's B, admitting that the way you're doing it right now is not working. So, but I know that it has been a strategy for success to constantly be nimble and to constantly look at how the paradigm is changing. And these are the two fronts that, if I have to be honest with it, maybe we'll talk about this for our 2021 goals. If I have to be honest with it, is somehow slowly figuring out how to work CSP into my art production workflow, and somehow working out how to bring one or both of my comics onto one of the Korean platforms just to see how they would do, and to also just get my toe in those waters. I need to be where the kids are, Brad.
Yeah.
But for real, and also just because you don't want to be stuck being the old guy going, I worked hard to get into newspapers and now they're dying and I don't have a career and I deserve a career. When the fact is none of us deserve a career. It's not like a God-given right. You have to earn it by constantly staying nimble and staying relevant to the audience.
And earn it year after year.
And year after year, exactly. What you can't rest on your laurels.
No.
And so I know that in my 40s, I've gotten a little bit laurel resty. Laurel resty, Brad.
That's natural.
I know, but what I'm saying, this is a prelude to our conversation for 2021, that as we all start to pull out of the pandemic, what steps do I personally have to take? I think part of it is making the willingness for change with my workflow, with CSP, and with the final product, which is a stronger vertical flow presentation for those Korean-based systems.
I think it has to do with embracing discomfort.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you what I mean by that. I just bought a new computer because my old one, literally, I run these computers until they die. And then I buy a new one. And then I can kind of talk myself into splurging a little bit more on more money than I usually would. I've been having problems with it ever since I bought it, right? And part of it is that I do that thing where you just, everything from your old computer, you just dump onto the new computer. Right. There's something I dumped that isn't working right with the new computer, with the new operating system. And I was having some real problems. I finally told after being on Apple support for an entire afternoon and getting nowhere, although they were very nice and did their best, I finally told Carolyn, I'm going to back everything up onto a drive, and then I'm going to wipe that hard drive clean, and I'm going to just reload only what I need, one thing at a time. And I said, I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm going to be miserable for the next 2 weeks. Because you know what happens next. You go to open something, now you don't have a font loaded. You go to do something, now you don't have a brush loaded. You don't have this, you don't have that. Making things sync, I don't seem to completely have the hang of that. I said, I'm going to come back grumpy as a bear for 2 weeks.
Right.
But at the end of it, I'm going to start to pull out of it, and I will be a happier Brad for the next year going forward, because I'm getting lags, I'm getting this, I'm getting that. And I was right. There was so many nights I came home, I was like, I was all set to work. I sat down, I lost hours because I needed this one font, or I needed to find this one brush. you just knock that off one after another. Here's another problem. Okay, that's what I'm going to be working on today. After a while, after embracing the discomfort, I've got to a much, much better place. And now I'm zooming right along. I think that's what you need to do, frankly, with Clip Studio Paint. I think you need to embrace the discomfort of being in a new system, a new atmosphere, a new way of doing things. And you're going to be miserable for 2 or 3 weeks. And then when you're going to start to pull out of it, and then I swear to God, you're going to be like me. I don't know what I was thinking, not switching sooner.
Yeah. Yeah. But like you said, it's the willingness to embrace discomfort for a longer term benefit. And I think at certain points in all of our careers, we go, dang it, I deserve a little comfort. I've worked hard, and now I want to comfort. I want to rest on my laurels for just a couple of years. Let me just rest.
Just a little comfort.
Let an old man sit down. Oh. And you kind of can't in this art career when you are working an independent career. And that's both okay because it keeps you fresh and looking out for new ideas. But it's also, you have to acknowledge it's a pain at some points. But I don't want to be the cartoonist who gets to 65 and go, oh, the world passed me by. I didn't keep up with where people were reading comics or how they were reading comics, and now I don't have a career. And can you go look at my GoFundMe? Hey, I created Wolverine, and I need to get a kidney. Whatever it is.
Or I need to go to the dentist.
Or I need to go to the dentist. Yeah, I don't want to be the artist that has to do the GoFundMe at 65 because I didn't keep up with how the market was changing. And so this is part of my year going forward is we've all experienced a year of discomfort.
Ooh.
And maybe that has prepared me for a little bit more discomfort for a goal now. Because we've all suffered through pointless discomfort. So maybe a little bit more discomfort for a goal is easier to swallow now. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and maybe this discomfort will take your mind out of the other discomfort. You're just,
This feels like a vaudeville joke where someone has a hurt toe, so they punch him in the gut or something.
Exactly. It's like, I got a headache, and the doctor slams a hammer on their thumb, and he says, but you're not thinking about your headache anymore. That's what CSP is going to be for you. And actually, I'm gonna end us right there because this is a perfect jumping off point to probably our next episode, or at least one coming up right after that. We're going to talk about our plans, our 1, 3, and 5 year plans for 2021, right. And stay tuned for that because I think there's going to be a lot of these issues that we're going to have to solve coming up.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that show, both in good ways and bad ways. So that'll be a good one to do.
Well, yeah, traditionally I hate doing that show. You had to drive me kicking and screaming, but I like it more now than I did then.
See, because you kept yourself open to change.
Yeah, exactly. I embraced the discomfort.
You embraced the discomfort, and now you're a you're a good guy.
That's our next magnet. Embrace the discomfort. We just need a good illustration to go with it. And on that note, you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your host have been my pal, Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com, which I highly recommend, by the way. I don't know if I mention that too often on the show, but if you have not checked out webcomics.com, it's an incredible resource for professionals, for pro-ams, and for amateur cartoonists. And Brad puts a ton of heart and soul into it, and I highly recommend it. He is also the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
Oh, I was waiting to see what you were going to say about Evil Inc.
That's a comic Brad does. I'm familiar with it.
I'm acquainted. And my friend, the avuncular Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Shell. You know what? It would be really fun to go back and watch Stripped. Like at this point, with so much time gone by, we should maybe. You know what, Dave?
We could do a Patreon-only watch where I talk about different sections.
Like a walkthrough, like a director's comment. I wonder
how could we live stream that?
There's got to be a way. Either that or the Discord server, you might be able to do something like that.
Yeah, maybe we could set up a channel. Let's think about this.
Oh, you know what? You do it the way I do we'll do it on Zoom. You do it the way I do my classes. You can do a screen share. You bring that video up, you screen share it, you can talk about it, and we'll just have a full-time live director's commentary.
That'd be interesting,
That might be something that's good. All right, Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and the cartoonist of the charming and wonderful Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and my favorite sci-fi, Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode and all episodes was edited by the Matt Woodard. By the Matt Woodard? When did he become the Matt Woodard? Sorry, Matt. But edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love ComicLab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode just like this one. Andrew Bamer, weighing in from Twitter, says the ComicLab podcast episode with Erica Moen was amazing. I've been trying to practice mindfulness in my day-to-day, which has really helped my productivity and focus as I try to balance being a dad, teacher, and writer during the pandemic.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's a lot. We've been there, Dave. When you've got young
what's
kids.
funny about literally hearing the word mindfulness?
Yeah.
Whenever I hear the word mindfulness, Brad, I always take a deep breath in through my nose and out through my mouth, and I straighten my posture a little bit because I realize that I've been tense and that I've been short breathing, shallow breathing. It's weird how that becomes like an almost a Pavlovian response now. When I hear the word mindfulness, I go... And I kind of straighten my posture a little bit, and I do feel better. So thank you for the word mindfulness there. I appreciate that. And I will say ComicLab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/ComicLab. So we'll go ahead and say that with mindfulness. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. That's been ComicLab on patreon.com/ComicLab.
Oh, that's delightful. We can leave them on an ASMR.
Welcome back to ASMR with Brad Geiger. Brad today will be talking about what he's talking about.
I'm going to be talking about success today. And to ensure success, I want you to take your checkbook, write it out, give us a nice 3-figure sum, make sure you sign it, and send that to Brad in Philadelphia. This is, once again, the best way to ensure success. Not yours, but Brad's. Get those checks in the mail.
This has been the final episode of ASMR with Brad Geiger.